Welcome back to the last section in this title where we're going to be connecting all the dots from everything that we've learned so far. So what we're going to do, we're going to be setting up a server. We're going to learn new stuff as we learn how to work with templating systems, namely EJS. We're going to run React on the server side, learning another new thing, taking React and having it work as a server-side component instead of a client-side component. We're going to also configure Babel 6, but this time around we're not going to use Webpack, and instead of that I'll show you how to set it up correctly on your own in a really powerful way. Last but not least, we're going to fully integrate a full registration flow using MongoDB. So by the end of this section, you're really going to feel comfortable in that world of full stack. So let's jump right into the first lecture, where in our first lecture, we're going to be setting up our server. And this is going to be quite familiar as we set up Express. We're going to use body parser and we're going to be connecting routes. So let's jump right into it. We've been through a lot together, but we're going to go through a lot more in this section. I wanted to start off completely from scratch just so you connect all the dots because we learned a lot of things in the last few sections. So let's jump right into it, and you'll find in your folder structure, I would say just create a completely new folder and let's start from scratch together. Alrighty, so let's go into our terminal, and in the terminal the first thing I want to do, and I'm inside of that React folder, what I want to do, in my case folder number 6, what I want to do is I want to start up npm, so I'm going to call that init function to start up our shell so we'll have something inside. This is not really our output shell that we're going to have really, but we're going to start from this so we have our basic starting point. Now in the folder itself I also want to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it public, and there we're going to put all of our public files. And I'm just going to go ahead into our earlier React folder, and I'm just going to grab the CSS folder and just put it right into that folder, into the public area. And that's really the only public thing that we're going to be using, our CSSs. Okay, beautiful. Now that we have the basic files in place, let's start building things out. So I'm going to go back into my terminal. And in my terminal, what I want to do next is I want to install a few things that you already know of. So I'm going to go ahead and install and save it into our production environment. I want to install a server framework itself, Express. I want to install Mongo.js because I want to save some information onto our DB because we're going to create a registration page. I also want to use body parser. As we saw previously, we use that to get all access to our information that is being sent. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click here on enter, and I'm going to start the installation process. While things are installing, well, I'm going to go into our editor, and to do that, I am going to go into my editor, and I'm going to create a brand new file, and that brand new file will be called, let's call it server.js, and contrary to what we were calling it so far. And let me go ahead here and save it, and I'm going to call it, let me just make sure I'm in the right folder. And folder number 6, server, save. Now, if already let's prepare things the way we're really gonna get them, because in the very, very near future, in this section, what I'm gonna want to add JavaScript version 6, JSX as we call it, into Node.js as well. But Node.js doesn't really completely support it, at least not in this given time. And what I really want to do is I want to make sure that all of my code is converted into ES5 before the server even starts, which is something I'm going to do in a later date. Now to make that happen, I'm going to go ahead and create another folder, and I'm going to call this folder source. Now anything that's sitting inside of the source, such as our server, is going to basically be pre-compiled or pre-built before we actually deploy it out. Now, some people call the folder deploy, some people call the folder build. I personally love using deploy, but I'm going to use build because it's a more common name. I'm going to call it build. And build for me is going to be, these are the stuff that the server is actually going to be using. Well, the source is going to be the stuff that need to be compiled before the server is really going to run. So let me go ahead here and just close that. We're not going to save it. And I'm going to go into my package to make sure that my main file is not actually indexed. For now, it's going to be our source/index. Okay, so I'm just making sure that it's the right file. Let's go back into our source, and I'm just going to open it up. And let's go ahead and start building things out. Now that we have, and let me just double check that everything was installed. Not that it matters because we're going to have a bit of time before we really have to get through this. So we're good. And let's continue. Okay, so first of all, let's build out our constants that we're going to need. we're going to need Express. And our Express, let's just load it up. And let me just go ahead here just to speed things up. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. And we're going to go ahead and load in all the things that are critical for us. So first of all, let me just go ahead here. I'll set our app. And our app, I'm just going to ask for Express itself by calling Express and invoking it. And the next thing that I'm going to want to load is the Mongo.js. And we're going to ask for Mongo.js. And last but not least, for now, we're going to load up also body parser. And we're going to ask for the body parser package. And there we go. So we loaded up our constants. Let's go ahead and also complete building up our server. So as we just created, we created a public folder inside of our folder structure. And what I want to do is I want to make sure whatever's inside of the public folder is just web accessible. To do that, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to ask from Express to use the express.static. And we're going to tell it that the public folder is that static zone. Basically telling it that if it's in the public folder, good, just serve it up. All right, next. We also want to make sure that when we're going to do our post, we want to make sure that our body is being sent. So I'm going to go ahead and use our body parser. And I'm going to ask for the URL encoded and extended, just like we've done in previous lectures. And what this is going to do is going to make sure that whenever there is a post, we'll be able to access the things that are being posted. So let's go ahead and just create a route, one route for our new server that we're creating, and we're going to focus on register. Now, for our register, we want to have a get. We're going to use a triangle function, arrow function, actually. Why triangle? It sounds very similar. Okay, post. Let me just copy the whole thing here as well. We have your get, we have your post. For our get, I'm just going to respond, send, got it. Okay, and for now, although we won't have access to the post because we didn't build it out yet, let me just go ahead there and I'm going to set it to be posted. Beautiful. Now we have only one more thing that we have to do to really get our server to run is we want to go to our app and I'm going to call listen because we want to actually have our server run. And I'm going to use port 3001. I'm going to create another arrow function and I'm going to go ahead and create your console call. And I'm going to say, our server is running on port 3001. There we go. We've just created the basics that we need to get our server running. Just go ahead and test if it actually works. And in our terminal, I want to go ahead and I'm going to type node, and our file is inside of our source, and it's server. So let me go ahead and run it, and let's see. So first of all, we have your little errors. Let's see what's our error. It's saying that it's not invalid left-hand side in assignment. Oh, because we see I forgot to close my arrow. So let me close that arrow down. You see, that's what happens when you call it a triangle instead of an arrow. And let me clear, and let's run it one more time. And our server is running. And if I go into our server and I just go into our register, we should get there. Got it. There we go. So we set up our basic structure for our server. In this lecture, we set up our Express using routes and we've used body parser.